Are you confused with all the myths out there that you're seeing in the media headlines about the housing market? Airbnb is going to crash the market and foreclosures are spinning out of control and these corporate people are buying every single thing out under the sun and all that other stuff. Well, let me bring you back to reality. I'm going to break it down for you real quick. My name is Nick with the Iannitti Group. Just want to come at you with a real quick housing market update for October. So let's start kind of with the biggest myth out there, right? Foreclosures are increasing. Okay. Yes, that's true. Foreclosures are increasing, right? But if you look back a couple of videos I did a couple months ago when I was talking about the unicorn years, right? Let's look at the numbers. Yeah, when you look at foreclosures compared to the unicorn years when there was a foreclosure moratorium, yes, foreclosures are on the rise. However, when we look at foreclosures compared to everything back to our normal years, right, all the way back to like 2015 or so, are they really that dire? No, they're actually much lower. They're at really historic lows right now. Okay, so don't believe the hype that the foreclosure market is going to upset the actual overall housing market. Not going to happen. Okay. The other thing, Airbnbs, they're going to crash the housing market. I did see a thing this week with the CEO of Airbnb. Obviously, they do have some issues with a lot of municipalities out there basically enforcing new rules, new laws against them, right? But he also said they're probably going to pivot and do other things, like instead of just homes, they'll also rent you a car and some other add-ons, right? It's definitely true. We know that in New York, basically, they're cracking down. They basically reduced their short-term listing offerings this year by 77%. Keep in mind, this is about 18,000 homes, right? First of all, just because someone can't rent it short-term doesn't mean that they can't rent it long-term. They probably can. These are investors that we're talking about. The other thing, in a city like New York, where you have 18,000 fewer short-term rental listings, in a city of like, I don't know, 11 million people or something, it's kind of a drop in the bucket. It's 1/10 of 1%, right? However, you also have places like Arizona, right? They passed a law in 2016 that basically said no city or town can restrict the number of short-term rentals. Now, granted, Phoenix has like 20,000 short-term rentals. A lot of them are sitting empty, and we may see some of those starting to correct, just from a free market capacity, right? Where people, if they're not being rented out short term, they're probably going to switch back to long term. But nothing in the data indicates that the number of short term rentals out there, if they were to actually come on the market, would be leading to a crash in the market. Just simply not true. Okay. The other thing is Wall Street's buying up every home in America, right? Wall Street, they're buying everything. Pretty soon, mom and pops, we're not going to own anything, right? When you look at it, though, this is basically total purchases, from investors, and I think it's a little bit easier to see the numbers here in a percentage, right? So this is basically out of all sales. So when you add up all these numbers, it's about 24%, which means about a quarter of the homes on the market right now are being bought by an investor, and that's definitely true. However, when we look at the type of investor, okay, when we're talking about what they're talking about Wall Street, REITs, things like that, that's something that owns over 1,000 properties, definitely an institutional investor. I know some of you right here in this category looking at it saying 100 to 1,000 properties, that's still an institutional investor. I would agree with that, but still that's 1% basically, okay? Think about this, 19.6% are made by mom and pop investors, people that own properties that less than single digits, basically 1 to 9 properties. This 19.6% basically is 80% of that 24%, if that makes sense, right? So yes, a quarter of all homes are being bought by investors, but 80% of those are being bought by mom and pop investors who own less than 10 homes, okay? Only 1% basically of those home sales are going to large institutional investors. So let's kind of keep that real, okay? When we're talking about overall inventory obviously has not gotten better, right? We're still dealing with a struggle with new listings, although in Florida right now, Sarasota market, we've actually seen the reverse of that. That's probably due to some winter seasonality, right? We have a lot of winter visitors coming back, so we've definitely seen an increase in new listings by almost a third, which is absolutely huge. But remember that I spoke about this last month, right? 70% of all mortgages out there are less than 4% interest rate, okay? It's going to take a lot to get these people to actually move because they don't want to basically have a mortgage rate that's almost going to double, okay? As far as the equity, though, still great news here. This is looking back the last 5 years. California is up 47.8%. Florida is up 80.9%. Big hitters also, Idaho obviously up, But basically here, the national average is up 57% over the last 5 years, right? So if you had a $400,000 home in the last 5 years, it's now worth $600,000. That's great. When you look at it over the past 30 years, though, this is kind of staggering, right? That national average jumps up to almost 300%. So there's no doubt people are sitting on a lot of equity. Keep in mind, right? Almost 39% of all homes are owned free and clear with no mortgage. Of the homes that do have a mortgage, 30% of them have more than 50% equity. 21% of them have 30 to 50% equity. So a tremendous amount of equity that people are actually sitting on. Okay. CoreLogic's 2Q report basically came out and said that the average homeowner now is sitting on about $290,000 in equity. And that equity can be used in a lot of ways. Obviously, you can tap it to pay down debt. People can sell that home and buy another home, basically cash, not having a mortgage. We're obviously seeing that. I thought I'd throw this in just because I saw some interesting numbers on here, right? This is the grandparent wish list to be close to the grandkids, right? I love this. That's basically with Go Banker and said, never underestimate the power of grandchildren, especially when it comes to lifestyle and financial decisions, right? We definitely know that, especially now that baby boomers are getting older and they're being more willing to relocate further away than they used to be. They're basically moving now more than 100 miles away. And I know that some people may say, well, we've seen a lot of migration lately with, going from the north to the south for a variety of different reasons and retirement and things like that. But still, this National Association of Realtors study broke it down like this. Wanting to move closer to family and friends is still twice as likely as any of these other reasons for people to move. Not that they don't move for these reasons, they do. But I thought that was really interesting. Keep in mind too, this is something that I did not realize, but almost 3/4 of all homes right now, a little over 3/4 of all homes right now are sold with no children in the home. Empty nesters basically are dominating home sellers right now. Okay, so what about current price appreciation? Well, we know right here, this is Nicole Friedman, right, with the Wall Street Journal. Home prices aren't falling anymore. Their surprisingly quick recovery suggests that residential real estate downturn turning out to be shorter and shallower than many housing economists expected, even as mortgage rates basically are soaring last year. This is John McKee from John Burns Consulting. Said January through August, housing demand stabilized, resulting in relatively stable home prices. We've definitely seen this across the country. By August 2023, national resale home prices fully recovered from the declines experienced in the second half of 2022 and now exceed their April 2022 peak. In other words, we gained back everything we lost there through the second half of last year. And then I thought this was interesting too. From Freddie Mac, overall, it appears the reduction in supply has outweighed the decrease in demand. Thus, home prices have started to increase even as sales have fallen. We've seen that basically across the board. Yes, we saw a tremendous decrease in demand when mortgage rates essentially doubled for the first time ever in 1 year. However, we've had such a reduction in the supply. From a supply demand standpoint, it's basically kind of been a push. Actually, a little bit better in the supply side. That's why home prices have still held where they're at. So, future home prices. This is Selma Hatt, basically chief economist, CoreLogic, said high mortgage rates have slowed additional price surges. That's a good thing. With monthly increases returning to regular seasonal averages. In other words, home prices are still growing, but are in line with historic seasonal expectations. What that means is basically we finally got back to like kind of a regular amount of appreciation. I shouldn't say regular, I should say a historic amount of appreciation where homes appreciated in the single digits every year, not double-digit appreciation year over year, which we all knew was not sustainable. She also goes on to say, nevertheless, home prices are still expected to re-accelerate and reach mid-single-digit growth by the end of the year. We'll see if that actually happens or not. But when we look at basically, these are just a multitude of home price expectations, right? AIE, Zillow, Fannie Mae, Home Price Expectation Survey, Mortgage Brokers Association, and NAR. They're still, when you average them all out, they're still at 3.3%, right? There are some that think we will get up, past that, that 6% or whatever. But again, that remains to be seen. So anyway, that's what's going on. Don't believe the hype. Remember that, I always say headlines do more to terrify than they do to clarify. So anyway, if you have questions about any of this information, if you want to know if now is a good time to buy or sell or what's going on, what's your home worth, how much equity are you sitting on, I'm more than happy to answer any of those questions that you have. Just reach out. Keep an eye out for my San Diego and Sarasota housing updates as well. Those will be out following this shortly. And that's it. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, who you choose to negotiate for you absolutely matters.